How are they demonizing Jordan Peterson when he is standing up for morality and children? Everyone on the left is so mentally ruined. They have no ideas. They only have enforced adherence. That's all they have. They just have demonization. They just have ad hominem attacks. They only have... They have no substance to anything that they say. And the reason is because when you look at the things they say, you realize they're endorsing crimes against humanity.
Inform the children.
It's gotten to the point of saying absurd things to crimes against humanity. This is only the beginning. They're going to justify... They're going to try to justify the annihilation of any person they disagree with. This is the end conclusion of their compassion. This is the end conclusion of their inclusivity. We already see that their inclusivity is bigoted exclusion. We already see that their compassion and empathy is actually the inverse of compassion and empathy, because the definition of empathy is being able to relate to the way someone else experiences the world, especially emotionally. And they clearly don't care about someone else negatively experiencing the world when they demonize them and cancel them and pretend as though that person's the person they disagree with is a bad person as a result of not adhering to their ideology. This is how they are mentally broken in totality. All right, guys. At this point, the radical left is essentially indistinguishable from a total force for evil. Jordan Peterson is talking about how he's being targeted by ideologically possessed Marxists in lower institutions of Canada that are trying to take away his clinical psychologist license. And not only that, but generally just harass him with the proceedings of what's essentially a lawsuit. And it's completely disgusting, because what they're really doing is trying to punish Jordan Peterson for speaking out against the brutal mutilation and sterilization of young unconsenting children undergoing the trans surgery. The problem with that, of course, is that children can't consent, and also it's immoral. So just to be clear, as Jordan Peterson said, the UN defines sterilization of people under crimes against humanity. So the radical left at this point is condoning crimes against humanity as just a common marker of their ideology. The left, to be clear, the left is right now, as we are speaking, promoting crimes against humanity as a virtuous position. This is the inversion of morality that is taking on the murderous, dangerous, horribly brutal and evil manifestation that I've spoken about before. To be clear, the radical left is endorsing crimes against humanity. Actual crimes against humanity is the sterilization of kids. Children cannot consent to being sterilized. It's evil. And any person that condones the sterilization of children is evil. They are completely a force for evil.
And my next move is going to be to say, hey, bring on the disciplinary board. They film those.
Wow.
I will put that on YouTube. So
the radical left is infuriated that Jordan Peterson is able to expose them as frauds so the entire world can see them as frauds. And they're also infuriated that he believes that he can expose them as frauds. Those two things are eating them alive, and you can tell that they're infatuated with the resentment riddled into Marxism. It's utterly disgusting.
if they want to make the case that, for example, my objections to the trans surgical mutilation of children, I believe that to be wrong, like,
These people are absolutely vile. Do you realize that we're on the right side of history? Do you realize that there is a side, a massive swath of people that is that celebrates sterilizing and mutilating children's genitals? Do you understand that that's the case? It is a mainstream leftist position. Not only is it a mainstream leftist position, but it is even celebrated and held up as a virtue. This is what the left does. This is actually a functional definition of evil. There are a lot of those when you're talking about the left, but they take a virtue and they invert it. The sterilization of children is on its face evil and wrong, and they call it a virtue. They call it good, and any person that points out the fact, any person that raises their hand and says, "Wait a second, this is a tyranny," because not only can I not say that this is wrong, but I also shouldn't have to say that this is wrong because this is self-evidently reprehensible. that person is immediately attacked and slandered. It's utterly disgusting. These people are crazed. They're insane. The radical left is endorsing crimes against humanity.
Like,
the radical left is endorsing mutilating children. The radical left is endorsing sterilizing young girls.
I believe it's actually a crime against humanity. The reason I believe that, by the way, is the UN definition of crime against humanity. One of them is involuntary sterilization. My sense is that if you're a medical professional...
Involuntary sterilization. A child cannot consent. A child cannot consent to being sterilized. A child, they can't consent to anything.
And you sterilize a child, that's involuntary sterilization, because they are not qualified to give qualified consent, informed consent, as anyone with any sense recognizes.
Yeah.
The people that are on the other side of this are generally demonic. They are actually just demonic forces. They're ruined people. Their brains have been destroyed by Marxism. It's essentially a corrosive force that is nihilistic, that tells them nothing matters, that tries to invert morality. I knew that this would happen as soon as there were people arguing on the mainstream that there's no such thing as right and wrong, that everything is morally relative. That right there is the death of civilization in my mind, because it's the same thing as saying there's no such thing as truth. If there's no such thing as truth, then your civilization is completely over. There is no future for a civilization that can't recognize what truth is. And to be clear, the radical left is not only endorsing child sterilization, they are proclaiming it to be virtuous. That is reprehensible. That is insane, and it's utterly barbaric.
You can't even go on a field trip without getting a signature, right? Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So they can't.
Right.
Yeah, they can't go on like a
Yeah, there are hospitals now.
genital field trip.
Yeah, well, there are hospitals now when
you guys realize that we're literally on the right side of history, that there are people that are endorsing crimes against humanity and calling themselves the good guys. How are they demonizing Jordan Peterson when he is standing up for morality and children? Everyone on the left is so mentally ruined. They have no ideas. They only have enforced adherence. That's all they have. They just have demonization. They just have ad hominem attacks. They only have... They have no substance to anything that they say. And the reason is because when you look at the things they say, you realize they're endorsing crimes against humanity.
inform the children.
It's gotten to the point of saying absurd things to crimes against humanity. This is only the beginning. They're going to justify... They're going to try to justify the annihilation of any person they disagree with. This is the end conclusion of their compassion. This is the end conclusion of their inclusivity. We already see that their inclusivity is bigoted exclusion. We already see that their compassion and empathy is actually the inverse of compassion and empathy, because the definition of empathy is being able to relate to the way someone else experiences the world, especially emotionally. And they clearly don't care about someone else negatively experiencing the world when they demonize them and cancel them and pretend as though that person's the person they disagree with is a bad person as a result of not adhering to their ideology. This is how they are mentally broken in totality.
Of what's going to happen. For example, if they castrate them, for example, they tell them...
How is the left on the side of castrating young girls? How are they... How? Aren't these supposed to be the compassionate people? And dude... What's disgusting is I'm not even surprised. I'm not even surprised, because if the radical left came tomorrow and said, we want to annihilate anyone that disagrees with us in a gas chamber, I wouldn't be surprised, because they've already said there's no such thing as right and wrong. There is nothing preventing them from doing that. They're evil. They're barbaric. They're totally totalitarian. These people are evil to their core. Marxism has destroyed them. It's gone from... It's brain rot, and it's also a virus that prevents them from accessing their higher faculties and accessing morality, accessing moral truth. Because as soon as you access moral truth, then you have to scrutinize everything that you think for either being right or wrong. That's why they're completely incoherent.
The girls, obviously they're not castrating the girls, they're just doing double mastectomies and sterilizing the girls, but they tell them that they might have to have their eggs stored because this is going to interfere with their fertilization, and if they ever want to have children, well, that'll be what they'll have to do. It's like, well, you know, every 12-year-old is capable of, yeah, no kidding. No
scary.
bloody
It makes
kidding.
me sick thinking about it.
It is absolutely despicable.
It's so horrific, it makes me want to do things I'm not going to say on camera, but I think that here's the thing, I think almost every single person would agree that that is beyond the pale and totally unacceptable. And yet, the people that are inverting morality, inverting truth, have a disproportionate sway and influence because they are under the banner. They say they're under the banner of virtue, even though it's counterfeit virtue. We have to smash that banner. We have to make it clear to people that the radical left is brutally evil. They have no regard for truth. They have no regard for the investigation of ideas that reveal truth. And it's completely beyond the pale.
Despicable. I believe that the people who've done this should be in prison for the rest of their lives.
And that would be merciful if those people are just in prison for the rest of their lives. If if you're castrating children, that's arguably worse than being a pedophile. And I think that I think pedophiles should be treated inhumanely. Let's just say, I'll leave it at that. So if they should be treated inhumanely, what should we do to people that castrate children? What do you do with people like that? I think life in prison is nearly an unjustifiable mercy.
Do you think
no
youth
excuse for this.
speaking up against things like that are some of the reasons why they're kind of...
I think that was the primary reason.
Really?
Well, I tweeted something out about Elliot.
And it's even more evil that they're doing it under the banner of the good guys. We're the good... Think of how dystopian this is. We're the good guys. We're just going to castrate this young girl in the name of in the name of virtue, in the name of us being good guys. Guys, we're woke. Look how inclusive we are. We're castrating the kids. That's what they're doing. They're committing crimes against humanity in the name of being the good guys. The left inverts truth. They deny the existence of objective frameworks so that when they invert truth, they can say, oh, there's no such thing as right or wrong. What do you mean that it's wrong to castrate young girls? What do you mean that it's wrong to do this to a 12-year-old boy? They're evil people. Opposing them is not only necessary, it's mandatory if you have blood in your veins. These people are evil. They're a threat to civilization. They're a complete threat to civilization.
Ellen Page.
Yeah, I
See,
remember
now
that.
we're in trouble. Now we're already in trouble. Yeah, I said that.
Because you can't speak freely in Canada. Dude, the United States should conquer Canada. We should take over Canada and overthrow their government and just make them part of the United States. Just rescue everyone in Canada.
I said, do you remember when pride was a sin and when a criminal physician cut off Ellen Page's breasts?
I like how Jordan Peterson is saying a criminal physician, because that's exactly who that person is. As a matter of fact, war criminal would be better. What do you call someone who commits a crime against humanity? A terrorist? I don't even know what that's called. The terrorist physician.
And that got me kicked off Twitter. But that was
when Twitter was owned by the communists before Elon Musk restored free speech. It's so crazy how it's such a stark battle between good and evil. Can I just say that real quick? Like, it's so fascinating how we've gotten to a point where it is so blatantly the good guys versus the bad guys, the people that believe in morality and truth, and the people that believe in moral relativism and castrating children. It's remarkable. It's very interesting how the architecture of Marxism is so perverse and incoherent that it revealed itself in this fashion undeniably.
I had friends who kind of upbraided me for being a little harsh, and we talked it over on YouTube for about 90 minutes, and I don't regret it at all. In fact, I think that in the intervening year since that tweet or so,
his friends are probably soft-hearted, weak, pathetic people that want to appease the radicals, but don't understand that the radicals actually want to enslave them and are tyrannical, reprehensible beings.
Tides turned very firmly in a direct...
And for people that would say, oh, you're just going to casually demonize someone that wants to castrate children. Yes, I will. Yes, I'm going to demonize any person that defends, justifies, suggests, or in any way, in any way just defends the idea of castrating kids. Are you kidding me? There is no middle ground. There is no compromise. There is no debate. Those people are just evil, and it will be stopped. That's an evil that needs to be stopped at all costs.
Action that indicates that my suspicions were more than warranted. You know, a lot of the European countries that were all on board with this so-called gender-affirming care have reversed their stance, right? Mm-hmm. Including the Netherlands, where
that's a very good point. And actually, it's extremely encouraging. They've literally outlawed the transition of minors, people under 18. They've outlawed the transition, and I'm so glad that's true because it sends a message, a very strong message, saying we're going to put a limit on the wokeness of our agenda, because we all know that the most egalitarian countries are in Scandinavia. It's those countries that are banning the gender affirming. It's such a perverse term, more like chemical castration and genital mutilation of underage people. That's what they've outlawed, and that's an incredible thing. And it's surprising to me because, as I said, they're very egalitarian and push left-wing doctrine, and are the originating locus for much of the incoherent feminist beliefs, for instance. One of the most delusional women that I've ever seen was from Scandinavia. Not that all women from Scandinavia are delusional feminists, but the most mentally wrecked delusional feminists have come from Scandinavia, that you get to see on the Fresh and Fit show. So, yeah, it's really interesting to see that a radically left-wing environment would put limits on itself when it comes to castrating children. You'd think that liberals and progressives would want to stand up. No, I won't use the word progressives, just liberals. Progressives are starting to become alt-leftists, and they're crazy. They're crazed with immense resentment. But liberals, you think liberals would be reasonable enough to take the side of children, but no. Because hypothetically, they're compassionate, right? But no, just castrate the kids.
This protocol, this hypothetical gender-affirming miserable statement, because it's such a lie, where that protocol first emerged.
There's no such thing as gender-affirming care.
The Dutch have realized that this is a bad idea. They've realized it in the UK and in Norway and Sweden, in France, and they're pulling back like mad.
It's essentially demonic. It's so evil, it's basically demonic.
Now, the Americans and the Canadians are still thinking this is just a fine idea, but
the reason why it's so believable that America and Canada are still thinking that it's acceptable is because the left has no self-correction. It is only a never-ending careening vehicle with no ability to steer itself or locate itself in space. Because once you strip yourself of the ability to say there's an objective truth and that there's such a thing as right and wrong and up and down exist, you can no longer even know where you are. You can, to use the analogy, you can no longer realize you're going off a cliff. And so essentially what these radical leftists are doing is they're digging their own grave by saying you can sterilize and mutilate children, because they can't admit to themselves that that's wrong, because 5 years ago they already said there's no such thing as right and wrong. They already said there's no such thing as objective truth, because that holds women accountable when they decide to be promiscuous. So feminism and the radical left have already said we disagree with the concept of truth, which allows them to justify anything, which also allows them to hang themselves as they purport the most, I'm not going to call it absurd, it just brutally reprehensible, barbaric ideas you could come up with, castrating children.
Well, it's probably still there's probably still people trying to do the balance sheet of what is the value of it, in America. I mean, a lot of things come down to kind of like,
they're willing to sacrifice even the kids at the altar of their insane woke ideology. In that sense, they're very similar to the Aztecs. The Aztecs, thousands of years ago, would cut off the heads of kids and roll them down the pyramids in order to appease the gods, in order to appease the sun god. Well, that's basically what the radical left is doing, except they're just mutilating the children instead. Oh, we're just going to castrate Sally. It's okay. She's 11, but she told mommy she likes to wear blue sometimes, so we know she's really a boy, and really we're going to encourage her because we're woke, and we need to put this on our Facebook profile as she attends a super liberal private high school where she's taught in her classes that there's no such thing as biological sex, and that gender is a social construct, and that the wage gap is real, and to hate the patriarchy because it's holding her back at the age of 11. So Sally now wants to be a boy because she's told that the boys are the winning team. Now Sally's a boy, and Sally's sterilized, but now Sally's being told that she's toxic because now we're demonizing masculinity too. Masculinity's toxic, so now Sally is suicidal because she's in the wrong body and is now 15 but hasn't gone through puberty because we're compassionate. Like that's how the left operates, bro. That's the leftist vision for the world, and the reason why it's the leftist vision for the world is because they have no vision for the world, because they literally deny the existence of truth, of objective coherence in and of itself. It's truly pathetic. By the way, Sally grows up to vote for Bernie Sanders and say that the patriarchy's holding her back as she's alone, dying alone with cats and stuff.
But can be profited
It's okay.
on.
At least the cats will eat Sally eventually.
yeah, well, that's for sure.
But do you feel like in Canada that they...
Meanwhile, Sally could have just grown up to be a nice girl, like Brett Cooper. Sally could have been Brett Cooper, but no, we have to mutilate Sally.
They are just, because Canada's kind of like it's, I don't want to say it's a passive place, but it's like it's kind of like a, I don't know, is passive the word, do you think?
I think
the word is, dude, Theo Vaughn's trying to define Canada to, okay, I love Theo Vaughn, but this is really funny because Theo Vaughn is essentially trying to not insult Jordan Peterson's homeland because he knows Jordan Peterson's going to not that Jordan Peterson would be hostile. I'm saying Jordan Peterson might embarrass him with a really rigorous description of Canada. Let's see how that goes.
Passive is a reasonable word compared to the excited states of America, let's say.
Okay, that's very fair, right?
Well, and I think to some degree, look, our Constitution originally, your
Let's just be honest. We need to invade Canada. We should take Canada over. Let's be completely frank. It would be very easy. We could take Canada over in 6 hours. Their military is essentially like 6 guys. One of them's overweight. You know what I mean? I think they have like 1 helicopter, and it's out of commission on Saturdays. Dude, just send in literally 3 Blackhawks and send in the Rangers, and we'll just fucking take Canada, save all these people, and install our Constitution.
System is predicated.
We'll name the entire Canadian. We'll name all the Canadian provinces Texas too.
On the idea of like right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and our Constitution was predicated on peace, order, and good government. Right, it's a very different view of what constitutes an
very different, very, very different
appropriate society.
Right.
The basic doctrines of your country are more entrepreneurial and adventurous. And
I wouldn't even call it entrepreneurial. I'd say that that's more of an end result. It's something more like you can embody the truest spirit of the human existence. You can make yourself into anything you want. And for a lot of people, that is entrepreneurial. But you can really define yourself, and you are recognized as having divine potential within you, which is completely different than saying we want to live in a peacefully ordered society, which is essentially what Canada is saying, except not if you're a trucker. If you're a trucker, you have to be put in jail because, you're dangerous.
And I really think you can see that in the difference between the two countries.
And more individual.
And more libertarian and more entrepreneurial. And you can see that in the temperaments of the two countries. And actually, things worked very well in Canada, I would say, till about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that, because our institutions, all of our institutions, were conservative in the best sense, right? They were reliable and stable and predictable, but they also honestly did what they were supposed to do. And that was true even of say, government-sponsored media agencies like the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the CBC, which is sort of our equivalent of PBS, but what was much more dominant in Canada.
Except that it's communist, obviously, because it's controlled by the ideologues in Canada who are extreme leftists. And let's be honest, Trudeau and his government, his cabinet, are definitely pulling strings to get Jordan Peterson attacked, because besides, actually, no, I'm going to just say, I think Jordan Peterson is probably the most famous person out of Canada. He's the most famous intellectual for sure. And the fact that he's the most famous intellectual and his views are coherent and therefore violently clash as a result of being logical and coherent with all of Canada's communist ethos, that's embarrassing, it's humiliating, and it shows them up. And so that can create a motive for taking him out. It can create a motive for demonizing him. And I think that's why it's very likely people high up in their government, administrators, bureaucrats, even politicians, would be wielding their power to punish Jordan for having opinions and coherent thoughts that demonstrate they're completely frauds. Because here's the thing, guys. They can't argue that he's wrong. They can just argue that he's a bad person. He's right, and he can obliterate and demolish any of them intellectually, not just because he can manipulate things, but because what he's saying is true, and he's vetted everything he said as being true, and he cares about truth. And everything he's saying is logical, coherent, thought through, and any person that's interested in ideas is immediately drawn to not only Jordan Peterson, but I'll call it this side of the internet, where we use our brains to use rationality, and we're not concerned with ideologies, whether that be feminism or Marxism or the radical left doctrine of conformity. But these leftists in Canada, all they can do is demonize Jordan. All they can do is demonize him because they can't contend with what he has to say. So that's why they say, okay, take away his clinical license, so that way we can say, defunct or disgraced, or, take their pick of disparaging ad hominem. That's all they have, because they can't argue anything. They can't debate ideas. That's the reason they're trying to attack Jordan, and that's the reason why they've tried to demonize any person that symbolizes their wrongness. You can see this with Elon Musk, although their attempt to cancel him failed. You can see this with Joe Rogan, who's an embodiment of free speech and genuine curiosity. That attempt failed. You see this with Andrew Tate, a physical and embodiment of how feminists are not only wrong, but violently professing the opposite of the truth and the opposite of their biology when they pretend as though he's unattractive or undesirable, and something that men should not aim for, which is the inverse of reality, and that also failed. So when you look at the constant humiliations of the radical left as they try to cancel people, they only become more ravenous and more infuriated as people see them as cheap, tyrannical, mentally devoid idiots. And that's what they are. They're complete idiots, but they're also evil idiots because they endorse castrating children, which is a crime against humanity, by the way.
Canada. And our higher education institutions worked, and our political parties were pretty predictable. You know, we had the Conservatives, and they were the party of big business, and everybody knew that. We had the Liberals, and they were the natural governing party, and they were centrists, kind of like more conservative Democrats.
That's how liberals used to be in 2008, bro. But then everything changed. Then enter the more violent, overt stages of Marxism, where we can see, wait a second, we're trying to regulate what people can say and think, and we're saying that virtue itself is defined by your adherence to the leftist ideology, and if you don't agree, you're a bad person. Oh, we're going to try to cancel people now, because if you don't agree with the radical left, you're a bad person. It is a natural progression. It is like a blooming flower. It is like the architecture of their ideas are taking its natural form. It's like a tent getting blown up. When you're, blowing up a tent and it's filling with air, or bouncy castle, it's taking on its true form. This is the true form. Totalitarian control and identitarianism and fascism are the in conclusion of the leftist ideology. It's merely inflating. It's inflating in front of your eyes, and you can see its dark, horrendous shape and what it has to offer.
That's about where I would put them.
Which is basically just tyranny. It's essentially dogmatic tyranny and the inversion of all truth and morality. That is the end goal, and probably also the depopulation of the earth, because they hate humanity. And go figure. I mean, they're already evil. They already want to castrate kids. Why wouldn't they want to depopulate the earth? Who exactly do you think they want to depopulate the earth? Because it has to be someone. Oh, maybe it's the people that aren't us, the non-good guys. Maybe that's who they want to depopulate the earth with. Why is no one talking about that, by the way? Why is no one saying, wait a second, the radical left wants to depopulate the earth. Who exactly are they going to target for that? Maybe we should think about that. Oh, you're going to have mandatory injections that are called vaccines, and you want to depopulate. Oh, interesting. Well, I wonder if it's just going to be the people that you think are good. I mean, why wouldn't it be that? I mean, we want just the virtuous class, right? Be aware that they want and desire your annihilation. They do.
Them in the political distribution. Mm-hmm. Then we had the socialists, the NDP. We still have these three parties, and they were essentially a labor party and made up of union people. And that's all blown into bits now. And those parties for years played.
Now they're essentially communists and just radical socialists.
Their roles, and they played them honorably and honestly.
See, that's true. And the reason why that could happen is because free speech and the integrity of ideas was still the most valued thing. Now it's not. Now adherence to group ideology, the left, group adherence to the radical left is the most important thing to leftists. And to everyone that's not a leftist, it's ideas. Well, here's the thing. When people see how disgustingly absurd and just mentally broken and corrupt the left is, they immediately get pushed in the direction of, wait a second, maybe there's something more to this story. Maybe the story is defined by things like ideas, coherence, logic, rationality, etc. And then they realize that the radical left isn't for them. But the people that have co-opted virtue and perverted it and are lying about it are the greatest threat to civilization that's on the earth. And they aren't capable of engaging with ideas because their brain has been destroyed. Their brain has been ravaged. They have no capability left to reason with ideas. They only have identity politics. Something is either right or wrong based on who says it. Something is either right or wrong based on how they instinctually, emotionally react to whether or not it jives with their ideological presuppositions or not. It has nothing to do with reason. Reason is a bygone construction in the wind. They don't care about any of that. And they definitely don't care about science. They only wielded science to, or they only pretended to wield science to say you're a bad person. That's all they cared about. It was just demonization all the way through. It's only demonization, and it only ever was demonization, because that's all they can do to anyone who disagrees with them. And the more people that realize they're frauds, the less power they have, and the more radical they will become, because they'll become more desperate as they become more infuriated. And in fear of basically being seen as frauds by everyone, which at this point is all the thinking people.